Hi everyone, we welcome you all to this week Tech Tuesday webinar on Azure Key Vault integration with IICS. Today's speaker is Purti Vaidya, who's a consultant product specialist. Before we start the session, let's go through some of the housekeeping tips. The webinar is for 1 hour that includes 15 minutes Q&A. You can post your queries in Q&A box which will be answered at the end of the presentation. All participants will be muted during the presentation. The session will be recorded and it will be available on our InfoSupport YouTube channel and Success Portal where you can download the slide deck. Please feel free to submit your suggestion or feedback for this session in the post-webinar survey. Success Portal is a micro-learning platform that offers free, unlimited learning to all the registered users. This feature-rich platform helps you learn and adopt to Informatica products better. Following are a few important links that you can go over later. This will help you in your product adoption journey with Informatica. Over to you, Spurti. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction. So I'll be starting with the agenda for today. That is, I'll be giving a quick introduction of today's webinar topic, that is Azure Key Vault integration with IICS. Then the purpose and scope of Azure Key Vault integration utility build, followed by brief description on Azure Key Vault, Azure portal setup. Then I'll be sharing the methodology used to build the Azure Key Vault integration utility for IICS connection update, followed by a demo of the utility where I'll be giving a walkthrough of IICS Cloud Application Integration Assets build and their execution. And at the end, we will have question and answer session. So this webinar is intended for all IICS developers, administrators, and architects. This session will help you learn how to automate the process of updating the IICS connections of any type created in the administration service with the secret values in the Azure Key Vault using IICS Cloud Application Integration Assets. So what is the purpose of Azure Key Vault integration with IICS? So if you have used Azure Key Vault secrets to store the credentials or connection parameters of an IICS connection, then there might be a need to integrate the Azure Key Vault with IICS. And there might also be a need to automatically update the IICS connection parameters when you import the IICS connection from lower IICS environment to higher IICS environment during continuous integration and continuous deployment, code promotion, or asset migration. That is because the connection parameters differ from one environment to another environment. For example, if you consider a database connection and its connection parameters like username, password, host, etc., then these parameters differ in the development environment when compared to QA or prod environment. And there might also be a need to update the IICS connections on schedule with password rotation so that you prevent the IICS connection from becoming invalid and causing the failure of the job. And there might also be a need to make sure the connection is always valid and doesn't become invalid because of the password expiry, and you might not need to go manually and update the connections with the new password. So for all these purposes, we might need to integrate the Azure Key Vault with IICS so that it automatically updates the IICS connection with the latest value, that is the secret values from the Key Vault. So what is the purpose of Azure Key Vault integration utility? The scope of Azure Key Vault integration utility is it automates the process of updating the IICS connection in the administration service. And here we have used IICS Cloud Application Integration Assets to automate this process. And here we are focusing on Azure Key Vault, where the connection parameters are being stored in the Azure Key Vault secrets. In this section, I'll be giving a brief description about Azure Key Vault and Azure portal settings that need to be made for Key Vault API permission and Key Vault access policy. What is Azure Key Vault? Azure Key Vault is a cloud service provided by Azure for securely storing and accessing the secrets. A secret is anything that you want to tightly control access to, such as API keys, passwords, certificates, or cryptographic keys. In our case, it might be connection parameters like username, password, client secret, host name, etc., depending upon the type of connection we are considering. So there are various ways by which we can access the secret values from Azure Key Vault. One of the way is by using the REST API, that is Azure REST API, and the other is by using Azure Key Vault Secret Client Library. The Azure Key Vault Secret Client Library need to be installed in the machine. Then it will allow you to manage the secrets with the help of programming languages like Python, Node.js, Java, .NET, or Go. But the best way and easier way to use is to use the Azure REST APIs, because you need not install anything on the machine, and we can use the REST APIs to automatically update the IICS connections from the Key Vault. So how do we authenticate the Azure Key Vault in the IICS code? Key Vault uses Azure Active Directory Authentication, which requires an Azure AD security principal to grant the access. An Azure AD security principal can either be a user, an application service principal, or a group of any of the above. There are two ways by which we can obtain the service principal for an application. First is by using the managed identity, and other is by registering the application with Azure Identity Platform. A service principal object ID acts like an username, and service principal client secret acts as a password. So using this username and password, we'll be able to make a API call to get the bearer access token, which will then be used in the authorization for API calls that need to be made to access the Key Vault secrets. So there are necessary permissions that we need to set for our service principal applications. We should make sure that we assign Azure Key Vault API permission for our application and set the Key Vault access policy for an application that we are using, so that we have a great control over access to the vault items. In this section, I'll be explaining the methodology that has been used for automatically updating the IICS connections. In the automation code, I have used the REST APIs, that is Azure REST APIs and IICS REST APIs. The Azure REST APIs that are being used are Get Bearer Access Token API, Get Key Vault Secret List, Get Secret Value. And in IICS REST API, I have used the Login API to get the service URL and the session ID, get the connection details, and update the connection with the help of calling the API for update connection. We can get the details about the IICS REST API from the official Informatica document. As discussed, the login API will provide us the server URL and base API URL and session ID, which will then be used in the header section of Get API call for the connection detail, and then we'll also be using them in the Update API call for the connection. This is the flowchart of the methodology that has been implemented. You can see client credential, Key Vault name, IICS connection name, and IICS credential becomes the input for this process. When I say client credential, it might be a client secret, client ID, tenant ID that has been sent as an input to get the bearer access token for making a Azure API call. And once I get the Azure bearer access token, I'll be using it in the authorization step and in the authorization section for making the API call to get the secret list in the Key Vault. Once I get the secret list in the Key Vault for a particular Key Vault, I'll be checking whether the particular secret is associated with the connection name sent as an input. Once I get the connection, secret connection, I'm going to pass the name of the secret, which contains the connection name and also the connection parameter. and then get the secret value for that connection parameter and send the valid body for updating the IICS connection after logging into the IICS. IICS cloud application integrations are being used for automating the process. As discussed, the service connectors, application connection, and cloud application integration process are being built for automating the whole process. And the service connector here is used to connect to the IICS REST API and to connect to the Azure API. An app connection is built on top of the service connector. And cloud application integration process is used to fetch the connection parameter values from the Azure Key Vault and automatically update the IICS connections. I'll be further explaining in detail in the demo later. To make sure that our IICS CAI process works properly, we have to make sure the prerequisites are being followed. Few of them are, we have to make sure that Azure portal settings are made for keyword access permission. And we have to follow a particular pattern for naming convention of the secrets. That is, the secrets in the Azure Key Vault need to be in the following pattern. For example, it should be in this way, where the first half of the secret name has the connection name of the IICS followed by the connection parameter value. Assume if you want to create the secret for an IICS connection for the username connection parameter, then it would be like the IICS connection name, assuming it is a Azure SQL Server, then the secret name would be Azure SQL Server followed by username. Since you're trying to store the secret for the username for this IICS connection. And the connection parameter value need to match the parameter in the IICS REST API get connection detail response. And the IICS connection names should contain only alphanumerical characters and dashes. This is because the Azure allows only the alphanumerical characters and dashes for the secret names. And since we are using the IICS connection name in the naming convention of the secrets, we should make sure we follow the same for the IICS connection name. That is, we only allow alphanumerical character and dashes in the IICS connection name. And then we publish the IICS Cloud Application Services, Service Connector, App Connection, and CAI process. Once all the IICS assets have been published, we are ready to go. Now I'll be giving a quick demo on how to set the Azure portal for Key Vault permission. And then I'll be giving a walkthrough of IICS Cloud Application Integration Assets and their execution. So let's start with the demo. So starting with the Azure portal setting, I have now logged into my Azure portal and I have now navigated to the application that I have created. And once you have created the application in the Azure portal, you will be having a client ID and tenant ID, and you might need to create client credential. So in order to create the client credential, you have to go to the Manage section, Certificates and Secrets, and then click on New Client Secret to create this client secret. So this client secret would be then used in the OAuth API call to get the variant access token, which will then be used in the authorization step for making the API calls for Azure Key Vault. And in order to use the Key Vault API, you have to set the API permission for the Key Vault service, that is for the application. So to do that, you have to go to the Manage section, then the API permission, then click on Add Permission. You can see you can request API permission for different services. And one of the services available is Azure Key Vault. So you have to click on the Azure Key Vault service to request the API for permission to access the Azure Key Vault Service APIs for this application. I have already done it for my application. Hence, you will be able to see that in the API permission section. You can see Azure Key Vault available here. So this is with respect to the settings that need to be made for the application. And if I go back to the Key Vault that I have created, so this is the Key Vault which I have created. You can see that the Key Vault name is KV-IICS dev. So this Key Vault I am using for storing the connection parameter values in the secrets of the Key Vault for IICS dev org. So if you want to store connection parameters for the IICS org related to the QA environment, then I suggest the best way is to create a separate Key Vault for the QA environment. Similarly, for prod and pre-prod, a separate Key Vault maintained. So now I'm using a separate Key Vault for my dev org, where in the secret section, I have created the secrets for the IICS connections. You can see these are the list of secrets that have been created in the Key Vault. And if you see the connection secrets names here, the secret name has first half the connection name followed by the connection parameter. So this is how you maintain the secret name within the Key Vault. For your better understanding, I have navigated to the post1 collection where I have made an API call for getting the detail for IICS connection name Snowflake dev. And you can see the connection parameter user here is user, and connection parameter for account is account. And similarly, if I go back to the API call that I've made for IICS connection Azure SQL Server, the connection parameter here is the username, password. So assume if you want to create a secret value in the Azure Key Vault for this connection, then you have to make sure the first half of the secret name contains the connection name, that is Azure SQL Server 1. And if you want to create the secret value for password, then it should be have Azure SQL Server 1 followed by password, as I have shown earlier in the Azure portal. So similarly, if you want to create a secret value for the connection Snowflake dev and for the parameter user, then it should be like Snowflake dev followed by user in the secret name of the Key Vault. Navigating back to my Azure portal. So if you go to the access policies, you can see I have added my application in the access policies and made it this as a principal so that my application is able to access this Key Vault. And we have to set the necessary permissions like key permission, secret permission, certificate permission for this application. So this is the necessary step that we have to take care. Navigating to IICS, I have opened the application integration service where you can see these are the assets which I have created for automating the process of IICS connection update. So you can see there is a service connector being created for Azure REST API, service connector for IICS REST API, and top of this service connector, an app connections have been created. So going to the Azure REST API service connector, In the action tab, you can see an action V is being configured for getting the bearer access token. If I go to the input tab, you can see client ID, client secret, grant type, resource, and tenant ID becomes the input for this action. And you can see the grant type here is client credential. This is because I'm sending the client ID, client secret, and tenant ID as the input for getting the bearer access token. And then the resource here is the vault.azure.net. That is, resource is the key vault. Since we are getting the bearer access token for accessing the key vault, resource here becomes the URL of the key vault. And the other actions that have been configured are to get the secrets list. So when I make the API call for this get secret list, it will list all the secrets that have been present in a particular keyword, which has been sent as an input. So you can see in the input section, the keyword name I'm going to send and also the access token. So this access token is the output that I get it from the first API call. So if I go back to this action and in the output tab, you can see this is the access token. And this access token I'll be then using to get the list of secret values. If I go to the binding section for this action, you can see the URL where I'm going to send the key vault name. In the other parameters, you can see the API version configured. And in the HTTP headers, you can see the authorization type is bearer and the access token is parameterized. This is the value which I'll be getting it from the first action API call for getting the bearer access token. And once I get the list of all the secrets, I'll be sending that to get the secret value. So before that, I want to show you how the response of get secret list API call would look like. So navigating back to Postman, this is the API call I had made to get the secret values list from the Azure Key Vault. And this is how the response body would look like. And you can see there is a field known as ID, which has the URL. And this URL will be used as a URL binding for getting the secret value for a particular secret. So you can see this is the secret URL that is being which is configured for Azure SQL Server 1 password parameter. So this URL I'll be then using it in the next API call for making the call to get the secret value from the key vault. So navigating back to IICS service connector. So this is the get secret value action which I was talking about. So if I go to input, you can see this is the URL. And in the binding, you can see this URL. If I scroll down, you can see the API version being set at the other parameters and the HTTP headers, the bearer access token. And later in the output, I'll be going to get the secret value, which I'll be using in the body of update connection IICS API call. So going to the service connector for IICS REST API. In the action section, you can see there are different actions that have been configured, one of which is the login API. By making a call to the login API with username and password, I'll be getting the output, that is session ID and server URL, which will then be used in the making the API call to get the connection details and to update the IICS connection. So let's navigate to the action get connection detail. If I go to input, you can see I'm passing that here, that server URL, IICS session ID for a particular user. And in order to get the connection detail, I'm going to get the connection name as a connection name as the input. And if you go to binding, you can see in the binding URL, the input connection name is being used. If I scroll down, you'll be able to see that in the HTTP headers, the session ID is being used. and the server URL is being used in the binding URL, which I have got it from the login API. And I'm going to get the necessary details for the update connection. That is, in order to send the body for update API call, I need to get the details of agent ID, type, and runtime ID. So the type is always a connection, and I need to get the agent ID from the get connection detail and runtime environment ID and the secret values. I'll be passing it for the connection parameter. So for better understanding, let me navigate to the Postman. So I have now navigated the Postman connection, and this is the API call I had made for the getting the connection details for Snowflake Dev IICS connection. And assume if you want to update the IICS connection for the parameter user. So you can see this user is present within the field connection parameters. And there might be a situation where the connection parameter is present outside the field connection params dictionary. That is, for example, if I go to another example where I'm making an API call for Azure SQL Server connection, and you can see the username and password here are outside the connection parameter field, con params field. So we have to make sure that this case is being handled while sending the update body for IICS update API call. So all these cases are being handled in the service connector with the help of xQuery. So let me navigate back to IICS and show you that. So if I go back to the IICS connection, IICS service connector, get action details. This is the JSON body which I'll be sending it for update connection. So if I go to the expression, this is the xQuery I have used, where I'm making sure that the connection parameter for update is being placed at the right place. I'm going to check whether the connection parameter is present within the dictionary of con params field or outside the field and place the parameter accordingly in the correct place. So this body will then be used in the update connection action. In the binding, if I scroll down, you'll be able to see the body being sent here. So this is all about the Service Connector IICS REST API. And let me navigate to the process Key Vault integration. So this is the CI process which is being used to automate the whole process. And if I go to the input section of this, you can see connection name, user name, Key Vault name, client ID, client secret, IICS region, and the tenant ID becomes the input. Currently, I'm getting the credentials like IICS username and password, client secret, client ID, and the client tenant ID. I'm fetching it from a database for the demo purpose. And then I'll be sending the input like connection name and the Key Vault name while executing the process. So let me give a walkthrough of this CAI process. You can see I have made a service API call for login. Here, it automatically calls the service connector app connection for the action login API. And once I get the server URL and the session ID, I'll be using it in the further API calls for IICS REST API. Then you can see the API call is being made for getting the bearer access token. And then I use it for getting the list of secrets for a particular key vault. So once I get the list of secrets, I'm going to loop through each of the secrets in the list and check the naming convention of that secret. If a particular secret, when passed, has the connection name that has been sent as an input for the CI process. Then I update that connection with the parameter value that has been stored in the key vault secret. And I'll be doing that by calling the API get secret value for the Azure. And then I'll be sending the right body for updating the IICS connection. So you can see here that each of the services have been handled with fault. Fault handling is being done. That is, if you click on the service and fault handling section, you can see I have checked the catch fault. So this will make sure that the faults have been catched. So you can see I have used an assignment step here. If I go to the assignments, you can see I have set a process title here with the help of set process title function. Assume if the process fails due to the fault, this fault will be caught in this fault handling section. And once the process completes its execution with the failure, it will rename the process to this value. So this will help us track the process execution in the application integration console. So this is all about the walkthrough of a process that has been used to automate the IICS connection update. So let us start now with the demo. First, I want to go to the administration service and go to one of the IICS connection that has been created. So you can see Azure SQL Server 1 is the one of the IICS connection for which we have the connection parameter secret value in the key vault. That is, we have the password and the username stored in the key vault secrets. So now I will edit this connection. I'm editing the connection with invalid username and password and save the connection. And let us test this connection now. So you can see the connection test has been failed since I have edited the username and password with the wrong values. Now let us go to the CAI process and run it for this IICS connection. So the connection name here is Azure SQL Server 1 and the key vault name is this. Let me save this input and run the process. So the process has started the execution. So let us navigate to Application Integration Console to track the process execution. If I load this, you can see the process has started. So my expectation is now the IICS connection is being updated by extracting the right username and password from the secret values in the key vault, and we should have the IICS connection test passed. That is, we should have a valid IICS connection test. So now you can see the process has completed its execution. Let's navigate back to the administration section and reload the connection. Let us test this connection now. Now you can see the test connection has been successful. So let me give one more example to you. Now let me open one more connection named Snowflake Dev and edit this connection. Now I'll be editing the account detail for this connection with the invalid value and save it and test the connection. You can see the test connection has been failed for this connection since I have given the wrong account value. Now let me go to the Key Vault and create a secret for this. So secret name, I would follow the right naming convention, Snowflake Dev, and it is account parameter. I have given the right secret value, content type, and set the expiry date and create the secret. Now the secret has been created for this IICS connection. Now what I'll do is I'll go to the application integration and rerun this process for this connection. So I'm editing the connection name input, that is SQL Server Snowflake Dev. Then this is the right Key Vault name. Let me save this and rerun the process now. So the process has started the execution. Let's go back to application integration console and load. The process had started. So now I expect the IICS connection to be updated. So now you can see the process has completed its execution. Let's go back to the administration service, go to the connection and reload the connection. And let's test the connection. You can see the test connection has been successful. This means the CAI process has automatically updated the IICS connection by accessing the right value for the account parameter for this connection. So you can see that you can maintain any number of connection parameters and in the secret Key Vault, and you have to run the CAI process for once, and it makes sure the IICS connection is updated with all the latest connection parameter values from the secret values in the Key Vault. So if I go to the CAI process, you can see in the properties detail, we have the service URL, which we can use it for scheduling the CAI process. We can use either the IICS Cloud Application Integration Scheduler for scheduling this process, or we can also use this service URL in our Azure pipeline or any other pipelines where you'll be doing continuous integration or continuous deployment, and also through the external process scheduler, so that we have the IICS connections always up to date. So that's it for the demo. I'm done with the demo. So now we will have question and answer session.
Hi everyone, we have reached the Q&A part. Please post your questions.
So we have a question from Lakshman. So can we get a recording for this, and also can you provide us with any sample jobs so that we can plug in values? So Lakshman, you will be able to get the recording in YouTube channel of Informatica Support. And regarding the jobs, sample jobs, you can we can get in contact with the help of email ID, and we can share you that. Whereas you will be able to download the slides from the webinar itself. So yeah. And Mohit, can you share the package of sample process that you have created with the serverless connector? Yeah, sure, we can get in touch. Yeah. Any other questions? So my email ID, you will be able to find it in the PPT slide that you will be able to download. It's spvaidya@informatica.com. And is there, Tony, is there any support with Azure DevOps automation? So currently here in the demo, as I showed, I'm just using the Azure APIs for Key Vault access. So I haven't checked with the other API calls. Okay, so we have seen that Mohit has asked a question. Will it only update the application connection in CAI and not in CAI connections? So this is the question. So you will be able to update whatever the connections you have created in the administration service. So here currently we support IICS REST API to update the connections which are created in administration service. So currently we don't have an API to update the connections which we have in cloud application integration. So yes, for CDI, we will be able to do it. So Tamil Dhanabalan has asked a question. Can we update Salesforce connection details and ServiceNow cloud connection details? Yes, we will be able to do that, as those connections, if you have created in the administration service, then it will be possible. So Satit Purochan has asked, after we got this secret from the Key Vault, how can we use the retrieved secret in the other services like IDMC or just covered on the IICS? Okay. So as I said in the webinar, we have an API call known as Get Secret. We will be able to get the list of all the secrets in a particular Key Vault. And after that, we'll be doing a pass action where we will be giving a secret name as the connection name and the parameter value. So after that, we'll be able to find out for which connection this particular secret is associated with. And then we will get the secret value. So we are integrating here the Azure APIs and the IICS REST API together.
Do we have any more questions? Right. Thank you, Spurti, for presenting today's webinar. We kindly request our audience to take up the survey and let us know your thoughts. Today's webinar will be available tomorrow on Success Portal under the Resources tab. With that, we will end today's webinar. Thank you all for attending.